Oh, got really quiet all of a sudden. Wow. All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is John Dinkle, publisher of the Baltimore Business Journal. I'd like to welcome you to our series of events entitled Knowledge is Power. Today, we've assembled a panel of local executives to discuss how to lead your company through legislative and marketplace changes. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our partners for helping us bring you this exclusive event. Our partners are Bank of America, Katz Bosch, and Offutt Kerman. So please join me in a round of applause. And let's get right to it. I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists this morning. And I'd first like to start with Belinda Sloat. Belinda has over 20 years of commercial banking experience. She is a senior vice president and senior treasury sales officer in Baltimore, Maryland for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. She currently manages a $32 million revenue portfolio of top-tier middle-market clients with annual revenues of up to $10 billion. Belinda has been with Bank of America for 8 years. Before Bank of America, she held a treasury management sales role with SunTrust Bank and JP Morgan Chase. She received her BS in finance from the University of Maryland, College Park, and is also a noted professional in her field, holding her certified treasury professional credentials from the Association for Financial Professionals in Bethesda, Maryland. She was recognized as Working Mother of the Year in 2009 by Working Mother magazine and appeared on the Today Show in April 2009 to discuss her success with work-life balance. Belinda lives in Severna Park, Maryland with her husband James and their 3 children. She enjoys spending time with her family, volunteering at her children's schools and on their sports teams, co-leading her eldest daughter's Girl Scout troop, reading, and going to the beach. Please help me welcome Belinda. Our next panelist is Michael Gentry. Mike, a shareholder with Katz Bosch, joined the firm in 1998. Mike serves as co-chair of the Construction Services Group and has provided accounting and tax services to contractors and construction firms for more than 15 years. In addition, he services closely held businesses in the distribution, healthcare, and transportation sectors. A dedicated professional, Mike holds the prestigious distinction of Certified Construction Industry Financial Professional, a certification held by less than 30 professionals in Maryland and less than 850 professionals in the United States. He is also a CCA Certified Construction Auditor. This nationally recognized certification is sponsored by the National Association of Construction Auditors. He applies his knowledge of the latest trends and changes in the construction industry through writing articles helping clients achieve their financial and personal goals. Please help me welcome Mike. Our final panelist is Tim Lynch. Mr. Lynch is a partner with Offutt Kerman, and his practice is focused on complex civil litigation matters as well as acting as outside general counsel to many owner-managed businesses and entrepreneurs on a wide array of business issues. In addition, Mr. Lynch serves as a corporate advisor to senior-level executives, physicians, and professional athletes throughout the United States. He serves as a board member for several privately owned companies advising on growth and management issues. Mr. Lynch is also a member of the firm's Executive Management Committee, serving as president and managing principal of legal affairs. Please help me welcome Tim. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator this morning, Martin O'Neill. Marty has been an operator and consultant in technology services and software industries for 25 years. Marty has led change his entire career, starting technology-based services companies and leading companies through successful acquisitions. He's co-authored and written multiple books and ran a business unit for a Fortune 50 company. Please help me welcome Marty.
Good morning. So let's just talk about format for just a second so you can get comfortable with your coffee and your breakfast. We're gonna go right till 9:15, but if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to jump up. If we get toward the end, I'll pick a table and you can ask the first question. So I'll make some eye contact here. It'd be sort of like entering a Southwest Airlines flight. If you don't make eye contact, the guy's not going to sit next to you. So I may make eye contact with that table or that table. So to be prepared for your first question. We have a distinguished panel here that can cover a lot of topics. So please don't leave here this morning and not get your question answered. We really have a wonderful opportunity to make sure we can tap into the knowledge of a very experienced panel. I want to make sure you have that. I had a conversation recently with a CEO, and he suggested that he was thrilled that 2013 was behind him. As we sort of we sort of come into the end of the first quarter of 2014, we look back a little bit over the last 12 months, and we think about sort of what happened. Detroit, one of our largest cities, files bankruptcy. We've had a government shutdown. Some of you folks have probably experienced the challenge of sequestration. We've lived through Snowden leaks for our many of us might serve a customer down in Anne Arundel County. We've certainly lived through the tragedy of a Boston bombing, and we've experienced, many of us as business owners, the challenges of a healthcare rollout and how we lead our staffs through that world. So it seemed like a sort of a challenging time, and as one CEO told me, who said the new growth for 2014 is flat. He's going to be happy with a flat year. I don't think that's what we all have in mind, so we want to make sure we can talk to some of our panelists about things we can do to make sure it's just not a flat year. But there's been a lot of cool things that have happened, right? The innovation continues to be spectacular in the technology marketplace. Now you can order a taxi via a new way. You can go to Uber, or you can send your images on Pinterest, and these are kind of brand new things we hadn't even talked about a year ago. Obviously, Google and Amazon we're still marveled at. And now, instead of drinking a soda from a Pepsi or a Coke can, you can just buy your own SodaStream tool and have it at your own house. So a lot of innovations, a lot of new things are happening. So as I want you to begin to think about what role all this innovation plays in your companies and how do you handle that. So you as a leader, how do you adapt to all that? How do you manage through the change? How do you manage through the legislative changes that are happening in the marketplace? How do you manage the marketplace changes that just seem to hit you? How do you get through all that at the same time managing your cash flow, making sure you have sound governance in your company, and making sure that you can lead now and into the future? So that's some of the questions we're going to ask our panelists about. So your question for you is, how do you run? How do you still maintain? How do you get through all these changes and still make sure you can be a positive force in your community? So we're gonna kind of walk through the questions in a format that is sort of the life cycle of what goes on in a company. We have experts in a variety of different fields. So I thought I would take it from going through an early stage. We're going to talk about strategy, we're going to talk about culture, we're going to talk about cash flow, we're going to talk about legislation, and if anything pops in your head while they're answering, please feel free. We're going to be as interactive as we can and bounce back and forth because of the great expertise we have. So I'm going to start with the concept of sort of early stage companies, early growth companies, and talk a little bit about cash flow. And I'm going to point this first question to Mike Gentry from Katz Abash, who deals with a lot of companies with cash flow. Mike, can you talk a little bit about how the tax laws have changed over the last couple of years and how they're changing in the future, and then what an impact that might have on cash flow?
Yeah, with respect to especially new companies, I think since the early 2000s, especially with purchasing equipment and things like that, federal government has allowed extensive write-offs for equipment purchases, and businesses have been able to take advantage of huge tax savings there. Starting in 2014, we don't have those write-offs. For example, last year, a business could purchase up to about $500,000 or $500,000 of equipment and take a write-off for that. Now in 2014, that write-off's no longer there. It went down to $25,000. And along with that, there was what's called bonus depreciation, where businesses could write off 50% of equipment purchases during the year, get a tax deduction for it, so they could take deductions, tax deductions, use pre-tax dollars to purchase equipment. Well, we don't have those anymore, so we're not sure how that's going to affect how businesses are going to look at their acquisitions going forward, because they don't have these tax write-offs that they had in the past, where they're now going to have to use after-tax dollars to purchase equipment. It's going to slow down purchases.
So many of us move our cash around, certainly on a personal basis, electronically. Belinda, can you talk a little bit about sort of the movement of cash and the movement of assets electronically in the banking world?
Sure. Most clients are now taking advantage of electronic payment mechanisms, whether it's their receivables or their payables, and they are expediting their cash in and trying to maximize their return while the cash is in the account. We have a couple of different strategies that we recommend. If the client is a net borrower, we recommend, of course, paying down that borrowing and not having any excess cash in the bank. If the client is not borrowing, we recommend perhaps leaving those balances on the account and offsetting service fees. Right now, overnight money is not paying much, it's paying 1 basis point. So with the bank earnings rate, which is a soft credit to offset service fees at about 15 to 20 basis points, you can actually make more offsetting your service fees than investing your cash.
Okay. Tim, kind of if you can think about early stage companies, how they manage cash, and also just any emerging opportunities which exist, which you see available to new startups or new companies, or even firms like yourself. What are sort of the emerging opportunities that you see there now?
Well, when you're advising startup companies or early stage companies, what we see is, at least on the law firm side, that it's important for them to have good, clear understandings in terms of their agreements with their partners. What we find is that they have to have an agreement that sets forth how decisions are going to be made. Everyone thinks about the upside. How do you share equity? How do you share profits? They don't think about some of the decisions when things get tough. So when cash gets tough, partners don't always see eye to eye. So you have to have agreements that are in place that resolve disputes and that allow for exits. And so it's sort of planning on the exit even for the startup. So while the entrepreneur doesn't think like that, they only think upside, good times. And so you have to plan for the downside as well, or at least for the disagreement. And on the capital needs side, what we advise clients to do is you've got really three choices. You can fund it yourself through equity owners or partners. You can work with banks, or you can work with outside investors, whether it's outside investors or smart money. And again, depending on who you're going to do business with in terms of raising money, gets back to, from the lawyer advisor side, what type of agreements do you need? It's a really different operating agreement or partnership agreement if you're going to have an equity funded organization than if you're going to go the smart money route. If you're going to go smart money or VC money or outside investors, they're going to require a completely different set of operating guidelines and decision making to protect their interests. So in terms of growth, what we see is, how do you want to grow? And what path do you want to follow? And you have to think about that when you're deciding not just the corporate structure, but really the governance documents that you have.
So I was once told by a mentor that when the man with the money meets the man with the experience with the experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. So I think having your paperwork in order early stage, whether it's whatever your form is critical. I think we all know that.
Marty, can I just comment
Please,
on that? Really, it takes, from an emerging startup perspective and from a banking, borrowing, funding perspective, capital injection, banks really look to a company being in business for 2 or more years. For startups, we've recommended going to a family member as a silent partner, using the equity in your home. Sometimes your local chamber of commerce has funding opportunities because they want to bring the business to the county. Same with county government. So there are a variety of options out there.
For emerging companies.
For emerging companies, but really banks, want to see a 5-year plan, and they really look to 2 years of being in business.
Mike, I know sometimes you accompany a client to a bank and help them discuss personal guarantees or cash flow needs or lines of credit.
Yeah, absolutely. We spend a lot of time working with the owner of the business and the banker, trying, interpreting the financial statements for the business owner, letting the banker know what's going on with the company from an outside perspective.
So one of the things I see all the time with companies that we work with is that entrepreneurs dying to get off their PG, dying to get off their personal guarantee. What's the path that they have to take, anyone, to sort of begin that path?
I'll let you take that.
So normally what we see, and I'm going to try and speak more from the bank side, because in order for somebody to not, from what we see is somebody not have to get a personal guarantee, is they have to have a very, very strong company, a very solid balance sheet, where that company is going to be doing basically doing the guarantees. Most of the time, I think a startup company is not going to be able to get a loan without a personal guarantee, and that's usually going to involve the owner of the business as well as the owner's spouse. They're not going to. It's very unusual that they would get away with their personal guarantees unless they have a lot of means.
Okay.
Highly liquid.
Linda, anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, liquidity is a factor. So if the company's highly liquid going in, or they have a lot of capital to start the business, then, you know, obviously we recommend going the cash route to fund the business versus borrowing, if they can do that. But, you know, definitely just to piggyback on what Michael said, you know, banks really look for a pattern of established business history before they'll look to lend.
And, you know, sorry, but given our, you know, the recent economic circumstances that we've been in, you know, getting out of personal guarantees it's not likely.
Yeah.
There's a pipe dream.
I don't know if it's a pipe dream. I mean, you can negotiate. I'm sure Belinda can comment on this too, but you can probably negotiate into your loan agreements that, you know, if there's certain equity requirements met, or if it's a real estate loan, if there's certain loan to value ratios met, then maybe the guarantees can be removed.
Okay.
But initially, I don't think you're going to get out of it.
Tim, for your perspective?
So I generally agree with that, certainly for the startups and the emerging businesses. But what we try to do is negotiate a burn-off, or that over time, when you hit certain metrics, the guarantee will come off either on a percentage basis or over time. So if it's a 5-year guarantee, and if you've got a strong enough balance sheet, they may agree to that. But we also look at it more from a holistic approach and tie in the overall planning for the owner. So it isn't just about starting the business and negotiating with your bank to get the line of credit and the guarantee, but we'll also look at it from a overall planning perspective and see whether or not we want to implement some asset protection, which the banks may not love to hear, but what we want to do is limit their exposure. So it may mean that we want to retitle certain assets that are outside whatever the guarantee is, so that if something goes poorly down the road, they do have assets that are shielded from creditor claims.
Okay. Again, if you have thoughts or questions, or something that's burning question you might have, please just raise your hand. We'll find you. Let's talk a little bit about market expansion and how we grow. Most of us are interested in a top-line growth. Maybe that's even a new product line, or new service offering, or a geographic expansion. Talk a little bit about even leaving our shores. Belinda, can you start? What kind of companies would begin to think about banking internationally, and what pitfalls are around that?
Well, international banking, at least for the larger banks, is our largest area of growth right now. And what we're seeing companies going into what we call emerging countries like Brazil, India, China to some extent. The thoughts really are sit down with your banker first and, you know, think about what you plan to do in that country. What type of business are you? We'll ask you, are you registered in that company? Do you have a 5-year plan? You know, we'll discuss the potential for trapped cash issues, especially in China and Brazil. It's very difficult to get your money out. I had a client who was advised by his CPA firm to, you know, do a capital injection from their USA account of $4 million, and they didn't realize the trapped cash, and it took several months for them to get their money out of the country. Had they talked to their banker first, we could have advised against that. So. It really is knowing the country first that you're going to do business in, talking to your banker second.
Mike, can you add anything to that around sort of any of the pitfalls and opportunities you see in geographic expansion, probably more regionally from your point of view?
Yeah, the clients I'm dealing with are more in the Mid-Atlantic region, and, you know, what we're seeing is clients in this area, and I'm talking more from the construction area, contractors coming in from out of town and flooding the market with competition, so gross profit margins are dwindling or just not there. So that's causing our clients to have to expand into Virginia, Delaware, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Problem with going into other markets is you don't know what the local regulations are, so businesses have to be careful. It's very easy to drive across the state line and say you're going to do business there, but every jurisdiction has its own set of rules that you've got to play by, and you need to make sure that you're playing by those rules. For example, you know, you may do a quick job up in Pennsylvania and not think that you now have a tax filing in Pennsylvania, and may not do anything about it. And then a couple years down the road, because maybe you had to drive some heavy equipment up into Pennsylvania, so you pull permits to drive up there. Well, Pennsylvania will eventually figure that out, and you'll start getting notices from them, and then you've got problems years down the road that you never even thought you would have had.
Gotcha. Kind of aligned with geographic expansion is sort of maybe a company's strategy or direction or choice of moving in that direction. Tim, I'd like to pose the next question to you, and it's around a sort of managing and leading growth. What have you seen for your clients, and how have you seen them managing growth and maybe ensuring that that's just going to continue? Is there best practices around sort of the strategy around growth and a direction of a company?
That's kind of a loaded question in terms of ensuring that it's going to happen. But look, Offutt Kerman as a firm likes to operate like a business, and we try to practice what we preach. So what we tell our clients is that if you want to grow, you have to have a vision and a strategic plan. One of our advisors said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So if you want to grow and you have a plan, you need to have a plan. So we think that doing visioning exercises with the owner managers and the corporate leaders, and then working with a strategic plan to develop one, is central to managing growth, managing expectations, and then you have to do the hard part. That's not the hard part. The hard part is having people committed to implementing what the plan is and following through with it. So we think that that's the best way to manage growth and to ensure success, is to have a good plan and follow through with it. And that plan has to be flexible enough to account for changes, whether they're legislative changes, economic changes, market changes. You've got to sort of go with the flow and move the plan in accordance with the factors that the market presents in the future.
Sometimes we see in the companies that we work with, it's sometimes the CEO or the leadership has one vision or direction, and that's not always communicated clearly to everyone else. So another best practice perhaps is making sure that everybody sort of gets that vision, gets that purpose, gets that direction. So a challenge that you might have is just walk around your organization and see who inside your organization has the same vision that you have, and can they be flexible, and can they share the changes they see in the marketplace and bring it up to the senior leadership. Any other thoughts on direction, strategy, and vision, maybe from Belinda or Mike?
Well, I think as far as communicating the vision from the top down is, the key there is to have, at least annual retreats, monthly meetings amongst your manager groups, and even your staff groups, so everybody knows what's going on with the business.
A lot of times these days we see so much is involved in social media. The technology trends are changing. Let's talk a little bit now about sort of what's going on in social media, how you may use that for managing change, understanding the change, finding out what change may be happening so you can set your company on the right direction. A lot has changed. Some of you may have made a business transaction on your cell phone sort of on the way in here. At least you used your phone to find the place. Belinda, can you talk a little bit about the technology changes and how people are using technology and cell phones to do the sort of the everyday banking or even futuristic banking?
Sure. So as a result of 9/11, when the planes were grounded and kind of had a ripple effect on money movement in the world, the Federal Reserve passed a law that banks could now receive images of items and transmit them electronically, and they would clear. And what that has evolved into is essentially smartphone or online banking. So from a consumer perspective, you can take a picture of the check, it will be deposited into your account, you can place stop payments, you can look at your balances, your transactions. From a commercial perspective, we're still getting there. We have to wrap our brain around the risk or potential risk for payments because of the fraud liability, but commercials can now access their balances and their transactions. They can approve wires if wires need to be released. So there is limited money movement available, but I expect there's going to be more to come.
Tim, can you address social media and technology and the role that it plays in growth and direction? And also, from a legal standpoint, Belinda touched a little bit about liability and fraud and sort of the maybe the fear factor that some business owners, entrepreneurs might have in sort of going that direction?
Sure. What we found with our clients that traditionally social media has been an important part of marketing strategy for only certain segments of the marketplace. But what we find now is that we're telling our clients that there aren't any businesses that can ignore it now. I mean, even our own, a law firm, which is traditionally not the type of industry where you would expect social media to be an important aspect of the marketing or the growth plan. But it is. I mean, whether you're talking about LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, or even things like Salesforce from a marketing perspective, we find that if you're not, we liken it to a website in 1995. If you didn't have one in 1995, it wasn't terribly unusual. In 2005, if you don't have one, you're not a real company. And we look at social media the same way, and we're telling all of our clients, you can't ignore it. It doesn't matter what business you're in. You have to have a social media presence. You have to have a website that recognizes that social media and smartphones and tablets exist. And then taking it to the legal side of it is that you have to educate your sales force and your people about the risks associated with social media. And you need to consider adopting policies. It doesn't matter whether you're three employees or 3,000 employees. You have to develop policies and communicate them to all of your people about the risks associated with that in terms of data security and revealing information about you, your company, on the social media risks. I can tell you, our lawyers are lecturing, if not weekly, monthly, on the best practices when it comes to internal guidelines on social media policies.
Please.
It seems every week you hear about another data breach, large companies like Target, recently the University of Maryland, and they always say it's limited in them, they will find and get forced. So what can a small business do to protect itself against these data things?
Just let me make sure that as we get started in the Q&A, did everyone hear that? Was that, or do I need to repeat and recap? Did you hear that back in the corner? Okay, so
Well, I can tell you.
Tim?
I can tell you what we do and what we tell our clients to do. So, again, everybody now has IT issues, and most of our clients outsource that work. They don't have enough revenue, and it's not a big enough. They're not a big enough organization to bring their entire IT structure in house. So, but whether you are, whether we do have in-house IT. But whether you outsource it or whether you're doing it internally, you've got to make sure that your IT people, that this is on the front of their mind. And what we do is we periodically will go through and have a third-party vendor come in and do a security check. And the bigger you are, the more expensive it is. But in terms of what we're telling our clients to do, is, it's a little bit like locking your doors at night and making sure your car door is locked. It's not enough simply to have a filter anymore. And, the bad guys are always one step ahead of the security people. So somebody once told me that locks don't keep out crooks, they keep out the honest people. Okay? If a crook wants to get in your house, they're going to get in. So the issue with data security now is making sure that you have locks to keep out the vast majority of those people, and then periodically checking to see that if somebody has gotten in, what do you need to do about it? And there are a scary amount of laws that are out there now that require reporting if there are these breaches. And that's really where we're spending more of our time with our clients, is educating them what to do when something bad happens.
Howard Community College did a workshop about 2 weeks ago, and they suggested that smaller businesses are becoming more of a target in the security issue, because if you kind of kept in track of the target breach, that happened through a mechanical company. That was an HVAC company. That's where the breach happened. They went into the HVAC company, and then they got into Target. So perhaps you'll see, requirements for small vendors to have a more secure environment in order to do business with larger entities. Another question.
As far as your social media presence, I mean, there's LinkedIn, there's Facebook, and those are the two big ones as far as for the business owner. Facebook's so much the social, but there again, LinkedIn is more business. Is there an advantage in joining a Facebook or having a Facebook page for your company versus LinkedIn at this point, or because a lot of crazy stuff is on Facebook, but you don't see it on LinkedIn. You want to maintain your reputation.
I know Kat Zabosh has a strong social presence. Mike, are you comfortable answering that?
Yeah, we have both. We have a presence on LinkedIn and we have a presence on Facebook. Personally, I agree with you. I think LinkedIn's business, Facebook is personal, but I think it's just the evolution of social media. Most companies have to be on both, and you just have to keep the craziness out of Facebook. And then you have to know what your employees are doing on Facebook and make sure they understand what the company message is, and they're not interfering with that.
So the publisher of Wired magazine was on the radio this morning. Anybody hear the presentation? So Wired magazine is a tech magazine that's been around, and this is the 25th year of the internet. 2014, the official internet was 1989, and he had an interesting line. It's something for change. It's for all of us to really think hard about. He said in the evolution of man, 25 years is nothing. So in the evolution of the internet, 25 years is nothing. In other words, he's saying that you ain't seen nothing yet. All this great stuff that's happened, we have no idea what's going to happen. So the change is here. We just have to manage it and get through it as best we can. But it's going to change and change dramatically. That was his point, a Wired magazine publisher.
Marty, I just have
Linda.
a comment. From a consumer perspective, I use Facebook and LinkedIn. And yes, there's crazy stuff on Facebook, but I think now people are looking at integrating both of those into their lives, the social aspect and the business aspect. So if the Facebook page is done to represent a business well, I think you will have credibility. I don't think that it will be harmful. I think it would be beneficial.
Agreed.
And just,
Tim?
Yeah, one comment. What we find, especially on the LinkedIn, is that for our professionals, they're busy and they've got limited time. So they've got lots of competing demands, whether it's business, whether it's personal, to do marketing and business generation. But any organization that has salespeople relies upon their salespeople to drive revenue. And what we are telling our people and what we're telling our clients about LinkedIn and some of the other social media opportunities is that it's a good way to do passive marketing. So again, it puts you out there, and there are things that people who are far more knowledgeable about these social media than I am, but having the presence and having the right kind of presence on LinkedIn can lead, while you can use it to mine and do more direct sales, it establishes a credibility in the marketplace if you do it the right way. And it's a nice way to do passive marketing because you can link it up with blogs and other marketing opportunities that are out there.
Let's stay with sales and the sales concept for a minute. A number of years ago, I was the entrepreneur in residence for UMBC. And a term I learned there I thought was bizarre was a company that was pre-revenue. And you guys out there that are pre-revenue? That's sort of a faint idea that you might have. So really nothing happens until you sell something, right? So everybody in this room has to sell something, whether it's a service or product or a thing that you do. I want to talk a little bit about sort of driving that top line, and we'll certainly answer your question. I want to talk a little bit about driving the top line and sort of engaging the sales force, maybe what you've seen as best practices for companies that you've worked with. And I'm going to start with you, Tim, back again. What have you seen that sort of motivate and drives the sales force and gets people engaged in the company and in the whole process?
What we found is that you need to align the compensation with what you want your sales force to achieve. So there's a big difference between growing revenue and growing profit. And so from a compensation philosophy, what we tell our people is, how are you compensating your sales force or your key, whether it's the sales force or the sales managers, or whoever it is that it's important, in addition to what Mike said earlier about communicating the vision, it's aligning the compensation structure with the behavior that you want. Because if you're just trying to grow, and there may be a good reason where that's your bottom line, you're not going to worry as much about profitable growth as you are growth. If you're trying to grab market share for some reason, because profits will come later maybe. On the other hand, you may need to drive profits. And so that's a different type of sale, and I think the compensation philosophies are important, and a lot of people, a lot of organizations don't look at it that way. They just say, I'm going to pay you X.
Mike, I'm going to pick up on that sort of that revenue expense. What do you have left at the end of the day? Gross margin,
Sure.
Bottom line. Just let me think about the question for a second. When you ask, if I walked around the audience now and said, how big is your company? You'd probably give me a revenue answer, right? And so from Tim's point, you generally wouldn't give me an earnings, and that's how we might value your company, on a multiple of earnings, right? So we wouldn't give that. We always do think, as American business people, we think top line. Mike, can you talk a little bit about what companies should also consider for making sure that they increase the value of the enterprise, and sort of understanding how things, what's the most profitable pieces of the business? A lot of times we see companies that have a lot of top line revenue, but not necessarily a lot of bottom line growth.
If any.
If any, okay.
So, yeah, one thing that makes me cringe is when I'm talking to a business owner and ask them how busy they are, and they just tell me they're incredibly busy. They have all this work on the books. And then you ask them, well, how much are you going to make on that work? And they can't give you an answer. They're so happy they have work, and they never really sat down and thought about, was it even smart to take this job on? Are we going to make money? Maybe they need to make at least 10% on a job to meet all their expenses, and turns out most of their work's at 6%. Well, they're already behind the curve there. So a lot of times business owners are just, they put the pedal to the metal and go, but don't really think about what it is, the work they're doing. So top line growth's not always the smartest growth. It may be, more of focusing on what work we do well and how can we make it profitable.
Any comment there, Belinda, from the banking point of view? Obviously, you can't send a revenue number. Income sometimes is a figment of your imagination from an income statement.
Right. Well, we look at companies from a revenue standpoint because we have, just from a lending standpoint, we are cash flow lenders. So we want to be able to know what you're going to be able to pay back at the end of the day. And so revenue companies within a certain parameter, revenue fit a certain parameter of banking needs, and that's how we segment, and we can really identify and customize those needs to the size of the company.
Belinda, I'm going to stay with you for a second here. Actually, I want to make sure I answer your question. Can you state your question? So I don't know if you heard the question in the back. The question was around crowdfunding, and some of you may not even know what that is. But so, what is crowdfunding? How does it affect maybe financial? What a company might do to find resources, and how do banks view that? Maybe who would like to start?
I actually do not know what that is.
So Tim,
the first 2 minutes.
I can address it. So the SEC regulates two things when a company wants to go out and raise money. Historically, they regulate the offer and they regulate the sale. So the offer is, how do I publish the fact that I want to raise money to people? The sale is, how do I actually close on that? So traditionally, the offer in the stock market would be, I've got a registered security, and my stock's out there, and it gets regulated that way. In the private world, offers are regulated through things like prospectuses, private placement memorandums, and the sale is, you've got to check the box that says you're a qualified investor. And so there are rules depending upon how, if you're in the private world, the unregistered security world, how you can qualify as an investor. So what crowdfunding does, or what it's supposed to do, is to ease those restrictions. So with the Jobs Act, what's come crowdfunding and some other restrictions, they've changed the rules to say, okay, you can't, it used to be you could not walk around on the street corner and say, hey, I've got a company, it's a private company, I want you to invest in it. Okay, now with some of the crowdfunding and some of the other fundraising options that are out there, you can, as a business owner, if you meet the requirements, you can post on Facebook, you can post an ad in the paper, you can go on the internet and start marketing, invest in my company. Okay? Now, so that's what they've put another way. What the government has done is they've eased the restrictions on the offer. Okay? And that's really where crowdfunding comes in, is that now you can offer a private ownership in a company, and I'll qualify that on crowdfunding, private investment in a company to the world. Okay? And you can do it any way you want. So they say no longer do you need a private placement memorandum, no longer do you need some of the other documentation and hire SEC lawyers and spend all this money. And they've also changed the sale. So what some of these alternative ways of fundraising have made it easier on the sell side as well. And the idea is to give more access to the capital markets to the small business owner. You know, it used to be you had to have a lot of money to go out and raise money because it was incredibly expensive to create these documents. So what crowdfunding has done is, I mean, in my opinion, crowdfunding is really a gimmick, okay? Because right now, crowdfunding allows you to go out, you hear about Kickstarter, you're not owning the company. All you're allowed to do is you're allowed to give, somebody can market the sale, and people literally can just donate money because they like the cause. The idea is when the regulations get finalized, they can actually own a little piece of the company. As a business owner, there are a host of restrictions on how much money you can raise and how many investors you can have through crowdfunding. And on the back side of it, it's probably more of a Merrill Lynch question than it is a Bank of America question, is on crowdfunding, you've got to go through a certain portal that's sponsored by a financial institution like Merrill Lynch. So I'm not sure that
It
answers.
does seem to be a little bit of the Wild West at this point, right?
It
It's
is
a-
the
it's a
Wild
little
West,
unclear, right?
but there are, other than crowdfunding, there are other options out there that aren't as well known that are probably better options for the small business owner who wants to raise money because there are eased restrictions on how you sell it. You really now can sell to the general public, but the SEC doesn't make it that easy because under the new guidelines, it used to be all you needed to do if you looked at a private placement memorandum and you wanted to invest, or you wanted to invest in a hedge fund, you just check a box that says, I'm a qualified investor. Now, what the SEC has done is they've eased the restrictions on the sale, but they make the business owner do a lot more on the backside to make sure that that investor really is qualified. So you can't just check a box anymore. You got to get a tax return or get some documentation to show that they really are qualified.
There's a company in Colombia that's an IT services company, and what they've decided to do is that the engineers that have the good ideas, they kind of qualify them inside the company, set up little LLCs, and then crowdfund, to try to get $200,000 or $300,000 for this idea of a piece of technology. To me, it seems it's still the Wild West, and I'm not sure he's talking to his bank about it or his accountant about it. But it's changing. And these SEC regulations, Tim, if I'm not incorrect, this is all brand new.
Brand new.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is just happening.
It's brand new. And on crowdfunding, the way it works right now is you don't actually own anything. You might get, if I want to make the world's greatest watch, I can open a crowdfunding site to raise, $1 million, and no one is owning my business, but they might get a watch.
Yes, sir.
I got a watch.
Sure.
Maybe a solution to a lot of the issues outsourcing, where a lot of companies today may not have the necessary infrastructure in-house to look for cost-cutting ways to maximize profits. There again, there are companies out there, one in particular, that can go ahead and perform cost-saving measurements, assessing expenses, whereby if someone's looking to cut expenses, it might be a viable way.
Right.
Maximize profits. Have you all had any success with that, with your clients or anything of that nature?
Linda?
I can speak from a banking perspective. We do have solutions in place. I know I'm supposed to be bank agnostic, but many banks here do, where we help clients, extend their DPO. So from a procurement perspective, we encourage them to put all of their payables on a credit card, which extends their disbursement and adds to their payables float by about up to 70 days. So you can retain that money in the bank. You make the payments on the credit card platform. The company charges the credit card, but you don't owe the bank for another 30 to 40 days. And so that's a way for companies to save a lot of money.
Okay, that's one way, but I'm talking about, like, for example, you serve, you generate your business through contractors, okay? Actually, when they have a job and they're trying to find every way possible to go ahead and cut costs through their expenses, have you had any success in that vein?
Yeah, so what most contractors would do in that case is they're going to start calling their vendors and start beating them up on pricing and try to get them down to the lowest price, and then manage the overtime on the job, little if any, things like that. Those, for us as accountants, we're usually the first to see the results. So that's like shooting ducks for us, because we're going to see where the problems are. Why are you spending so much on labor? Why are you spending so much on advertising? And those are easy questions to follow up on.
There are a few companies out there that do the expense reduction, so that's one angle that the business owners can look at. Question?
Back to the high growth, changes in growth, or different ways of opportunity. The panelists had experience in selecting the right people, what measures they might use, whether it's testing or different ways of finding the right people to put in place to make sure we're executing the vision and
So is this more around building an advisory team, or more around hiring the right kind of people? Okay. So Jim Collins, who's written a number of great books, Good to Great, and he has this great question that all business owners should ask themselves. If you had to do it over, would you rehire your same team? And I think that's the key here. If you had to do it over, would you rehire your same team? So best practices, concepts around, you folks go into businesses and you see if it's the right team or not. How do you counsel business owners and business leaders on that concept?
From a banking perspective, we look for continuity, definitely, in leadership staff. We also look for a pattern of management discipline. We want to ensure that the company is executing on their policy. Those are definite measures of success for the bank. From a product introduction standpoint, we do beta testing, so we do a market sampling of our client base to ensure that we're delivering the right products to the market. And we will touch on those clients that we feel are very strong and very successful to make sure it's what the public wants.
So I'll continue to ask this question with Mike and Tim, a little different angle. Earlier time in my life when I was looking for investors, it seemed like the investors always wanted to make sure I had a good idea and a good leadership team and a good plan. The leadership team was critical. So when you obviously from a banking point of view, the leadership team is important. How do they find these right people, and how do you know when you have the right folks on? It's a loaded question, I know, and it's not a definitive answer, but things you've seen, Tim, that have worked.
Well, in terms of finding the right leadership team, again, I think we deal a lot with owner-managed businesses. So the leadership team is usually going to be comprised by the owner. So, and then the question is, where's the company in its stage of growth? Where's the owner in terms of what the owner's objectives are? So is the owner growing the business what are they doing with it? So most of our clients are growing their business to sell it. And so the question then becomes is who are you selling it to? Are you selling it to the employees? Are you selling it to your family members? Are you looking to be acquired? And so those issues are the central questions that we would ask underlying, okay, so then what type of management team do you want? And that gets back to my earlier question is if you're building to grow, what's your timeline? Because if you're trying to grab market share, all those things come into play. But once you've established those issues, then I think it's important then to look to see what's the right leadership team. And so once you've established those priorities, you've got to have somebody your leadership team needs to be on the same page when it comes to meeting the owner manager's vision and goals. And so is the cultural fit the right way? Are we compensating the right way? We also are strong believers in doing testing. So and there's a million tests that are out there, we prefer the behavioral tests. So whether it's the DISC tests that are out there, because they're generally easy to take. When the test taker doesn't see a right or wrong answer, you're not testing math. Mm-hmm. And so what we see is those tests come back with behavioral patterns. And so when you're the owner manager, if you are somebody who needs to be in control, it's probably a really bad idea to bring in a number two who needs to be in control. And there are testing mechanisms that are out there that will help guide you in making those hiring decisions.
Mike, I'm going to ask you a specific question around bringing on the right controller or CFO, and sort of when is it time for that to sort of round out your team with a real financial expertise?
I guess it just depends on the size of the company, and we certainly like to see our clients with a very strong bookkeeper, controller. Normally what we would recommend at that point is having somebody do the interview process for the company. And because if you're going to run an ad like that, you're going to get 500 responses, and you're going to get anywhere from somebody who's a Walmart cashier claiming to be an accountant. Have somebody filter through all the qualified candidates and then narrow it down to a few that the owner can work with. And then, we certainly suggest that the accountant is involved in that process, because that person's going to be working very closely with the accountant, the bank, other financial advisors.
Other questions? We're getting ready to sort of wrap up. We have a question in the back here.
I have a question for the panel. What is your opinion of the emerging virtual CFO platform? I see a heavy penetration in my market for small business to hire a virtual CFO. And I'm a little hesitant to empower them with that. And how does that virtual CFO know the ins and outs of business thoroughly?
So in the back, just it's the outsourced CFO. How do you know as a business owner if that's the sort of the right approach for you, and are they credible, and is it a path that you should consider?
I can't really comment from the outsourced CFO perspective, but we have many clients that use an outsourced controller. That's worked very well because they may not just have the capacity for somebody to bring somebody on full time, and it is usually a win-win situation. There's obviously going to be some growing pains in the beginning. They need to get to know your business and understand how that business works and what the expectations are.
Liabilities, Tim, issues, concerns, risk, governance, anything that we can address around those topics?
Well, I mean, you certainly need to hire the right person if you're going to do the virtual CFO. And my experience is a lot like Mike's, in that again, if we're talking about the owner manager of the business, they need to know their strengths and weaknesses. And so if they're not financially oriented, you need to have a strong accounting a strong accounting partner, and it may be that depending on the industry you're in, you actually need a CFO. Most of our clients, smaller clients, they don't have CFOs. So they're doing it in-house. They might benefit from a virtual CFO if they get the right one. As far as the security goes, with the way the electronic access that all managers have these days, I don't know that there's anything different for the virtual CFO as far as the CFO is working from home. they've got access to everything anyway.
The only thing I can add to that is we have a number of clients, members that do that, and that I think they found their best sources by referrals. You know, I'm comfortable with this guy. He's got 2 days a week available. You should talk to him, and it's just a comfort level that they got through referrals. A couple more questions, yes, sir.
How does nonprofit, for-profit partnerships help companies to grow? And then also from the tax perspective that you were speaking on earlier, Michael, in terms of write-offs, those types of partnerships, does that help with types of tax write-offs?
Well, for a not-for-profit, it wouldn't matter because they're not going to be taxed on it anyway, so they're not worried about those deductions.
But what I'm asking is, for instance, if a for-profit company, a construction company, partners with a nonprofit, purchases the equipment for a nonprofit venture, building a nonprofit, a new building for a nonprofit, or something like that, and does that in partnership with the nonprofit, perhaps hiring clients that the nonprofit might have, et cetera. Those types of partnerships where they're real partners on a particular venture. And does that help with tax write-offs, with bottom line, for the for-profit?
For the for-profit company, they'd still be taxed the same way. So what I said earlier would still stand true.
I'm going to just say,
Tim, yeah.
where we see it, where we'll see physician groups and athletes are often interested in forming a not-for-profit arm to do something, whether it's charitable or they want to get involved in it, they want to get a research grant, and so they're interested in forming those things, and they may have somebody, a family member or a close person working for the not-for-profit as a way to shield some income. I'm not sure how effective that is. My personal experience is that it ends up usually being more hassle than it's worth unless you really have a lot of income and you're extremely dedicated to whatever the mission is.
I'm not sure if I guess they're donating to their own charity
Yes.
and taking a charitable contribution for it, but
Right.
the family member that's working for the not-for-profit is still picking up the income that they're making in the not-for-profit. So.
It sounds like it's something you don't go into casually. You probably need counsel on that from one professional or another. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
That's not a wing it kind of opportunity. Last question for the day. Who's got it? It's going to be a profound one. Yes, ma'am.
And this is actually more for Belinda than for the gentleman, because you probably don't have the same issues that some of our ladies have. How have you found, well, let's have my first child.
Congratulations.
I'm wondering how you were able to find that work-life balance in the beginning. I realize this was
Awesome question.
now, but
Yep.
It's really important for those of us who are having children.
Yep. Linda.
Sure. I mean, it's multiple things. Having a strong partner support you, obviously. Leveraging.
Are you saying that because he's here?
Actually, he had to sneak out. Leveraging kind of, what I did is I leveraged my stay-at-home mom network. So if I had to go to work and my children needed to be picked up or taken somewhere, I knew I could call on a neighbor. I tell my friends, hire a wife if you can do it. So have someone come in to take the cleaning load off of you, take the laundry load off of you, if you can do that. Family members, I had my mom and my sister. I was very fortunate. So really building a network of support is very, very critical. And it really does hold true. It takes a village. Now, from an employer standpoint, it's asking that employer, what type of flexibility options do you offer? I'm very fortunate that I can work from home, but I also had to prove myself to do that. So it's a give and take relationship. I started out with my employer saying, can I work from home for 2 days a week? And, but this is what I'm gonna do. You'll always be in touch with me. You'll always be able to reach me. I'll be visible to you, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely it's, a team approach, without a doubt. And it is hard, I'm not gonna lie to you. It can be really difficult sometimes, but definitely manageable.
Okay, we're going to wrap up, and we're going to wrap up with Baltimore Business Journal is going to come up and kind of wrap us up. But I just want to make sure I take you through a little bit of what we talked about. We talked about early stage companies and the things that they might have to do. We talked a little bit about how cash is king and how to make sure that in the new technology age we can move our cash around and know where it is. Managing and leading was a theme that we hit on. Also the social media technology, not to be, as Tim mentioned, not to be left behind. The change is going to keep on coming. How to drive our sales, how to consider what parts of our business are most effective and make the most money. What role does strategy and strategic planning play in all of this, and what are different sources and methods for raising capital? And then what we didn't hit, I was hoping we would hit, was culture. So maybe afterwards we can talk a little bit about culture. So I'd like to wrap up, but thank you very much and thank the panel.
Thank you very much, Marty. We really appreciate your time this morning, and thanks for being a part of our series. We really appreciate it. So thank you, Marty. And again, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all very much. I'd also like to thank again our partners, Bank of America, Katz Abosch, and Offutt Kerman. So congratulations. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to mention, just so you could take please a second to include your contact information on the sheets at your table so you can stay in touch with us and our partners. And we are tremendously grateful to have you here this morning, and have a great day.